In today's video, we will be going over 3 MLB Hall of Famers who have just terrible stats and 3 players who are not in the Hall of Fame who could replace them. I think we can all agree that sometimes players get into the Hall of Fame who shouldn't necessarily be there, whether it's bias or poor voting. And then on the flip side, there are individuals who are just completely overlooked for reasons that I will never comprehend. And today we aim to fix what we didn't break by looking at some terrible MLB Hall of Famers and who should replace them. Let's start off with possibly the worst defender in baseball history and a huge reason why many players from the 19th and early 20th century are overlooked: Tommy McCarthy. He played in the MLB for 13 years from ages 20 to 32 from 1884 to 1896 for the Boston Reds of the Union Association, Boston of the Braves franchise, the Phillies, the St. Louis Browns of the Cardinals franchise, and the Brooklyn Grooms of the Dodgers franchise. Honestly, I don't even know where to start. He has the lowest WAR amongst all position players in the Hall of Fame with 16.2. But he said, no, that's not good enough, and he tried to pitch, accumulating negative 1.5 pitching WAR. Negative 1.5. He also has negative 3.1 defensive WAR. He has only one more season with positive WAR than Connie Mack, who's in the Hall of Fame as a manager. He only had 6 total WAR in the National League. The rest was in the American Association. He had a 102 OPS plus. That's not even top 1,000 all time. According to Jaws, he is the 145th best right fielder of all time, just behind Heavy Johnson and just above Chicken Wolf. Elite company. How do I put this nicely? He has less WAR than Bobby Witt got in 2024 and 2025 combined. He has a lower OPS plus than Brad Wilkerson, which is just who? And look, I know they didn't have WAR and OPS plus when he was elected, but they did have eyes to see the rest of his terrible stats. He never once led the league in runs, hits, doubles, triples, RBIs, home runs, average, or OPS. He only finished in the top 20 in the National League in batting once in 1893. And on the topic of batting average, he only bat above the league average for 6 out of his 13 seasons. So in his time, he wasn't even that great of a batsman. He was just average. And not average amongst Hall of Famers, average amongst all the ball players. But just for fun and for comparison's sake, let's take a look at his career versus Eric Young Sr.'s. Young has more WAR at 18.8 than McCarthy at 14.6. McCarthy does actually have Young beaten OPS plus with a mark of 102 versus Young's 92, but Young has more hits, legitimate steals, meaning after the rule change in 1898, and a ton more extra base hits. Young also has more offensive WAR than McCarthy, so Young must have gotten at least 80% of the Hall of Fame vote, right? He got 1 vote out of the 573 people that filled out a ballot. The Veterans Committee elected 10 other players that year in 1496 besides McCarthy. The next lowest person in WAR had 28.1 more WAR than him, which was Jack Chesbrough, who had over 3 times the amount of WAR than McCarthy. They must have heard he invented the hit and run and just lost their minds. I have a feeling it went something like this. Eddie Plank, okay. Ed Walsh, yeah. Jesse Burkett, okay. Joe McGinnity, yeah. Rube Waddell, sure. Tommy McCarthy. They say they let him in not because of his stats, but because of his contributions to strategy in baseball. But I'm sorry, that's not a good enough excuse. If you wanted to do that, let him in as a pioneer, not a player. Except only inventing the hit and run is not good enough to be called a pioneer in baseball. So there's really just no excuse for him being in the Hall of Fame except for the fact that it's a one-way ticket. McCarthy ended his career 1 year after holding out for more money and then proceeded to put up a 71 OPS plus and batting 249 in a year where the league average was 290. So we can very clearly see that Tommy McCarthy does not deserve to get in, but who should replace him? Look no further than the man who debuted 7 years after Tommy McCarthy, Bill Dahlen. Dahlen played in the MLB for 21 years from ages 21 to 41 from 1891 to 1911. He played for the Chicago Colts of the Cubs franchise, the Brooklyn Superbas of the Dodgers franchise, the New York Giants and Boston Doves of the Braves franchise. Other than the fact that old-timers like Dahlen are just overlooked, I really have no idea why he's not in the Hall of Fame. He is tied for the 10th best shortstop in Major League history according to Jaws and the 9th best according to WAR. He has more WAR than Derek Jeter, Pee Wee Reese, and Ernie Banks. He is top 10 in shortstops in WAR, runs, triples, RBIs, stolen bases, and walks. He also has the 11th most defensive WAR in baseball history. And just like McCarthy, they didn't have WAR back then, but Dahlen put up some great counting stats, especially for 19th, early 20th century players. At the time of his retirement, he was 13th all-time in runs, 15th all-time in hits, 10th in stolen bases, and 11th in RBIs. All that to say, according to the time he played in and his era, he was a top 10 to 15 player. Sure, his batting average wasn't great. In fact, it's 5 points below the league average for his career, but he was a dazzling defender who added so much value to his teams. All of that versus Tommy McCarthy and his hit and run invention and 14.2 WAR. A quick comparison of the two shows that Dahlen is a more than deserving replacement in the Hall for McCarthy. Dahlen has 60.6 more WAR than McCarthy. 60.6, that's more than the entire careers of Harmon Killebrew and Vladimir Guerrero. Dahlen also has 31.6 more defensive WAR than McCarthy, which is more defensive WAR than Dahlen has total. That's how bad McCarthy is. When he gets compared to other ball players, he literally adds to their stats. Dahlen has McCarthy beaten almost every category except average, where McCarthy is actually a slightly better hitter when it came to their respective leagues in terms of batting average. But yeah, there's really not even a competition here. The only thing that McCarthy has going for him is intangible with his strategic advancements to baseball, and that is simply not enough for me. But what is more than enough for me is Bill Dahlen's 75.2 WAR, elite defensive play, and great ranks amongst the players of his generation, and that makes him a worthy replacement. For our next subpar Hall of Famer, we have Rube Marquard. Marquard played in the MLB from 1908 to 1925 from ages 21 to 38. He played for the New York Giants, Brooklyn Robins, which are the Dodgers, Cincinnati Reds, and Boston Braves. Now, Marquard isn't bad when you compare him to the average ball player, kind of like McCarthy, but he's kind of terrible when you compare him to Hall of Famers, which is where he is in the Hall of Fame. He is the 259th best starting pitcher in MLB history according to Jaws, and the 264th best according to WAR. Those numbers are comparable to Steven Strasburg and Sonny Gray, and nobody is calling them Hall of Famers except for their parents. They're good ball players and above average, but they're not particularly close to the Hall of Fame. He has well below half the career WAR of an average starting pitcher in the Hall of Fame, and only a little bit more than half the average Hall of Famer in Jaws and WAR per 162 games, as well as all of his Hall of Fame metrics being below average. And normally that would be okay if the player has an X factor like Luis Aparicio with his defensive WAR, but Marquard does not have that. He only ever had 3 seasons above 5 WAR and never broke the 6.4 mark, never really won a ton of games, never led the league in ERA. He only struck out more than 150 batters 3 times. In fact, 2/3 of his seasons are below the 100 strikeout mark. He almost always played second or even third fiddle to the starting pitchers on his own teams. In New York, it was Christy Mathewson and Jeff Tesreau. In Brooklyn, it was Jeff Pfeffer. In Cincinnati, it was Dolph Luque and Epo Rixey. In Boston, it was Frank Miller and Jesse Barnes. So he didn't even stand out on his own teams, let alone in the Hall of Fame. Like I said earlier, he was still an above average ball player for the most part. Over 200 wins, a 103 career ERA plus, and over 1,500 strikeouts. Those are more than good counting stats for an average ball player. But his 3 best seasons account for over half of his WAR, and his best 2 for over a third. So there just really is not a reason for him to be in the Hall of Fame. His inclusion in Cooperstown has been traced by Joe Posnanski to his inclusion in a 1966 Lawrence Ritter book titled The Glory of Their Times. Marquard is the first entry in that book, and his interview for the book is largely filled with glorifications and hyperbole of his career. So yeah, Marquard is more than likely not a deserving Hall of Famer, but who is, and one of the most outrageous exclusions in baseball history, is Jim McCormick. McCormick played in the MLB from 1878 to 1887 from ages 21 to 30. He played for the Indianapolis Blues, where he was teammates with the man who has perhaps the most legendary name in sports history, quote, the only Nolan. McCormick also played for the Cleveland Blues, Cincinnati Outlaw Reds, Providence Grays, Chicago White Stockings, which are the Cubs, and Allegheny City, which are the Pirates. Let me name you the pitchers in MLB history who have more WAR than Jim McCormick and who are not in the Hall of Fame. Zach Greinke, Clayton Kershaw, and Justin Verlander, all active or ineligible. Curt Schilling, a Republican, and Roger Clemens, a cheater. Every non-controversial or eligible player above him in WAR is in the Hall of Fame, and only Clemens is ahead of him in Jaws. But Jaws in McCormick's case needs an asterisk next to it because Jaws is a combination of your peak 7 WAR seasons and your career WAR, and McCormick only played 10 seasons. But if we take a look at his fellow 19th century players, only John Clarkson and Kid Nichols are ahead of him in his best 7 WAR seasons. And he's ahead of guys like Pud Galvin and Old Hoss Radburn in total WAR, Jaws, and Jaws adjusted for 19th century pitchers. So he was among the elite pitchers of the early days of baseball. His Hall of Fame stats look great too. None of them are below average, and his gray ink and monitor scores are well above average. And taking a look at his ERA, he had a 2.43 ERA, and the league average ERA for his career was 2.91, leaving him with an ERA differential of 0.48 and an ERA plus of 118. Jim McCormick was one of the greatest pitchers of his era, and his stats still look good compared to players today. Now let's take a look at his stats compared to Rube Marquard. McCormick at 76.2 WAR has more than double the WAR of Marquard at 32.4. McCormick also has almost double the amount of WAR per 9 innings pitched than Marquard, with the numbers being 0.16 to 0.088. McCormick also has a better win-loss percentage and more total wins, which matters more when pitchers threw almost the entire game every single time they went out there, like McCormick did. McCormick has a better WAR, WAR per 9 innings pitched, ERA, ERA plus, WHIP, and FIP. In other words, McCormick is light years ahead of Marquard and a more than worthy replacement for the Hall of Fame. Next up in our final not so great Hall of Famer Famer is Harold Baines. Baines played in the MLB from 1980 to 2001 from ages 21 to 42 for the White Sox, Rangers, Athletics, Orioles, and Indians. Now, Baines is definitely the best player we've looked at amongst the bad Hall of Famers, but that does not mean that he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. He got 38.8 WAR throughout his 22-year career, averaging 2.2 WAR per 162 games and .0137 WAR per game. So in both volume and efficiency, his WAR numbers are just not that good. But let's compare them to his right field Hall of Fame peers. He is the 63rd best right fielder in MLB history according to WAR. He only has 5.1 more WAR than Nick Markakis, who only got 1 vote in this last election cycle. He also only has 4.1 more WAR than Shin-Soo Choo, who only got 3 votes this last election cycle. Both of those guys, by the way, have more WAR per 162 games than him, and Shin-Soo Choo has more offensive WAR and a higher OPS plus, but those aren't the comparisons that this video is dedicated to. Baines is also the 78th best right fielder according to Jaws, well behind guys like Jason Hayward and Giancarlo Stanton. He only has 2 more Jaws than Ronald Acuna Jr., who has played 8 seasons. 2 of them he lost to injury and 1 he lost to COVID. His 121 OPS plus ranks 122nd amongst all right fielders, and his 365 advanced on base average was just a little bit above the league average for his career. So his advanced stats are not looking that hot. But I mean, he does have good counting stats. He has the 15th most hits, 10th most RBIs, and 18th most home runs amongst all right fielders. So there's at least something to his Hall of Fame case. Unlike Tommy McCarthy, I mean, seriously, that guy is so terrible. I mean, I don't even care if he's catching strays 5 to 7 minutes after we talked about him. He deserves it. He's bad. But with Baines' value stats being poor and his advanced stats being nothing special, I don't believe that he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. But someone who does deserve it and has Baines nearly doubled in WAR and in 800 less games is the lanky, mustache-wearing second baseman Bobby Grich. Grich played in the MLB from 1970 to 1986 from ages 21 to 37 for the Orioles and Angels. Fun fact, Bobby Grich actually fell off the ballot in 1992 in his first year. Pete Rose, who mind you had just been banned from baseball 3 years prior, got 30 more votes than Bobby Grich, the guy who was banned from baseball. However, shout out to the 11 people who did vote for Grich that year. You guys have some serious ball knowledge. But anyway, Grich has 71.1 career WAR, 5.7 WAR per 162 games, and .0354 WAR per game. So his WAR efficiency stats are over double what Baines has, and he's only 6.4 WAR shy of doubling him there too. Quick question, what was Harold Baines known for in his career?
His power.
Right, his power. So who do you think has the higher single season home run mark, Grich or Baines? Well, it was actually Grich with 30 in 1979. The best Baines ever did was 29 in 1984. Bobby Grich has 7 seasons of 5 or more WAR. How many does Harold Baines have? 0. Harold Baines has all but 2 of his seasons in negative defensive WAR, and Bobby Grich has only 1 season in negative defensive WAR. The only second baseman in MLB history who has more WAR than Grich and is not in the Hall of Fame is Lou Whitaker, who should also be in the Hall, by the way. And the only guy who's above him in Jaws and is not in the Hall of Fame is Robinson Cano. He has the 10th highest OPS plus amongst all second basemen who have more than 40 WAR. There is only 1 second baseman in history who has more WAR and defensive WAR than Bobby Grich, and that is Frankie Frisch, who, you guessed it, is in the Hall of Fame. He is 7th all time in wins above average, which is like WAR, but instead of being compared to a replacement level player, you get compared to an average ball player. So it's a little bit harder. He also has the 10th most walks amongst second basemen. Now, his counting stats aren't great outside of his power. He ranks 15th amongst all second basemen in home runs, but his OPS plus and WAR are enough to put him in the Hall of Fame over a guy like Harold Baines. There you have it, 3 not so great Hall of Famers and 3 people who could replace them. Now, I don't think this will ever happen. I don't think the MLB will ever kick somebody out of the Hall of Fame, but it's for sure something as baseball fans that we should think on. They could absolutely add Dahlen, McCormick, and Grich, but my fear is it's far too late for those 19th century players like McCormick and Dahlen, thanks to people like Tommy McCarthy. But let me know if you agree or disagree with my list in the comments down below. I would love to get your thoughts on the video. But as always, thank you guys so much for coming to class. I've been Professor Baseball. You've been great. Here's your flag of the day. Leave your guess as to which country it could be in the comments down below, and I will see you next time.